Well, hey guys, we're in Pinecrest Cemetery today in DeKalb, Mississippi, and we're going to visit the grave of and hopefully learn a little bit about the man who served in the United States Senate as Mississippi Senator for 41 years, 1 month, and 29 days. I'm talking about Mississippi's longest-serving senator, John Stennis. John Cornelius Stennis was born on August 3rd, 1901. His family was a middle-class family right here in Kemper County, Mississippi. They had immigrated from Scotland to South Carolina and then here to Kemper County. He received his bachelor's degree from Mississippi A&M, now Mississippi State University, in 1923. He got his law degree in 1928 from the University of Virginia. While he was in law school, he won a seat in the Mississippi House of Representatives and served there until 1932. He was then a prosecutor and served as a judge for Mississippi's 16th Judicial District until 1947. He was the prosecuting attorney in a case called Brown v. Mississippi, where 3 African Americans had been beaten and tortured to get a confession. The Supreme Court eventually ruled that this case was a clear denial of due process. John Stennis was sworn into the United States Senate in 1947 during Harry Truman's presidency. Stennis served in the Senate as a Democrat. Stennis spent 31 years as Mississippi's junior senator, even though he had more tenure than many other members of the Senate. At the time, he and Senator Eastland were the longest-serving Senate duo in American history. Leading up to the 1948 convention, Senator Stennis and, Senator Eastland as well, supported General Eisenhower as a Democratic nominee for president because they didn't think Truman could be reelected. Eisenhower was considered more acceptable to Southerners. The Mississippi senators openly backed a rebellion against the DNC's declaration of support for civil rights. Stennis seemed to be a little hesitant to adopt the outspoken position that Senator Eastland had, but after receiving criticism, he adopted a more harsher position. In July of 1948, Stennis said Congress did not have constitutional authority to enact anti-poll tax legislation. In 1956, Stennis, along with Senator Eastland and Allen Ellender and Strom Thurmond, met in the office of Georgia Senator Richard Russell. They met to show that Southerners would not be intimidated, especially for the cause of civil rights, by Northern senators. In 1958, when President Eisenhower placed the Arkansas National Guard under federal control and sent the 101st Airborne to escort 9 black students into Little Rock Central High School, Stennis challenged the legality of placing guardsmen there by saying the Eisenhower administration had violated both the U.S. Constitution and other federal laws. During the presidential election of 1960, Stennis promoted John Kennedy rather than sending a slate of unpledged electors to the convention. Mississippi was won by the unpledged electors that year. In 1962, Stennis led the Senate's opposition to the Kennedy administration's literacy test bill. In 1963, Stennis and Eastland and Georgia Senator Russell opposed a nuclear test ban treaty, arguing this would lead to military disadvantages. John Stennis wrote the first Senate Ethics Code. He was the first chairman of the Senate Ethics Committee. In 1965, he opposed the Johnson administration's emergency appropriation request for the Vietnam War. But in August of 1967, he advocated for the expansion of bombing of North Vietnam, believing that it would hasten the war's end. In 1970, Stennis issued a call on presidential candidates in the upcoming election to visit states outside of the South and tell all their parents, "I'll do to your schools what we've done to the schools in Mississippi." He thought that the upholding of de facto segregation in the North was an unfair double standard against the outlawing of de jure segregation, which was segregation by law in the South. So in 1971, he sponsored a measure to enforce school desegregation laws in areas where segregation had been caused by residential patterns and in communities where segregation had been sanctioned by law. The policy was passed by the Senate on April the 22nd of that year. To shorten this video, just know that Stennis became a big champion for defense spending, beginning in 1972. In 1973, he was shot twice outside his home in Washington during a robbery. In 1977, the New York Times announced President Jimmy Carter's approval for full funding of the Tennessee-Tombigbee Waterway. The Times stated that this prevented him from having to fight with Senator John Stennis. In 1978, Stennis expressed his dissatisfaction with Carter deciding to halt production of neutron weapons. In 1978, he worked toward the approval of a $37 billion defense spending bill, and President Carter personally assured Senator Stennis that he would not veto funding of a large nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Stennis opposed withdrawing from Panama as rapidly as he did, but after Carter signed the Panama Canal Act into law, he said, "I want to thank Senator Stennis for outstanding leadership resolving the many difficult issues embodied in this act." Oh, I almost forgot what I consider to be really kind of funny. In 1973, during the Watergate scandal, the Nixon administration proposed what it called the Stennis Compromise. The hard of hearing John Stennis would listen to the contested Oval Office tapes and, of course, report on their contents. This guy was obviously involved in all kinds of political happenings for a long time in the United States Senate. For a time, he was chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. He was chairman of the Armed Services Committee and, of course, the Senate Ethics Committee, and even served as president of the Senate. He was the Senate's most senior member for his last 8 years of service, and he was the last Democrat to serve the state of Mississippi in the United States Senate. During his political career, he was a staunch supporter of the military. Perhaps that's why the USS John C. Stennis was named in his honor and commissioned in 1995. The USS John C. Stennis is a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier. Stennis was an ardent supporter of racial segregation. He opposed the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and 1968, and let's not forget he signed the Southern Manifesto of 1956. Later in his senatorial career, in 1982 in fact, he did support an extension of the Voting Rights Act. But a year later, he was one of 2 United States senators who voted against establishing Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a federal holiday. But in 1986, he campaigned for Mike Espy. Mike Espy was the first African-American congressman from the state of Mississippi since Reconstruction. John Stennis did not run for re-election in 1988 and retired in 1989, having never lost an election. John C. Stennis died on April 23, 1995, at St. Dominic Hospital in Jackson, Mississippi. He was 93 years old. Well, I hope you've enjoyed learning a little history and a little bit about Senator John Stennis today. Thank you.